Welcome back. It's your host, Gabe Morales, continuing with our true crime profiles. Today we are going to discuss the Hillside Strangler, or to be more accurate, the Hillside Stranglers, since they were two adoptive cousins involved in cases during the late 1970s that terrorized the greater Los Angeles County area. The two were accused of kidnapping, raping, torturing, and killing of many women, ranging from the ages of 12 to 28, during a very scary 4-month period between the latter end of 1977 and the first part of 1978. I remember hearing about it because I was getting ready to graduate high school, and I had given thought about moving to the greater Los Angeles area, where I had family. Authorities said that Angelo, Buono, Kenneth Bianchi, the two killers, would often pose as police officers driving at night, pull over unsuspecting women drivers, then abduct them and take them to Buono's suburban home. That is where they were raped, tortured, and then their bodies dumped on wooded hillsides not far away. I actually had one of these sick-minded individuals on my yard at New Folsom, and the other was caught in Bellingham, Washington, not far away from the Canadian border, where I have visited many times. The inmate I had at New Folsom Prison, Angelo Buono, was born in 1934 in Rochester, New York, to first-generation Italian immigrants. The other, Kenneth Bianchi, was born in 1951, also from Rochester, New York, to a 17-year-old alcoholic sex worker who gave him up for adoption 2 weeks after he was born. And that is when he was adopted by Nicholas and Frances Bianchi, who was their only child. It is said that Kenneth Bianchi was a deeply troubled young man, with his adoptive mother describing him as being a compulsive liar from the time he could talk. He would often fall into inattentive, trance-like dreams where his eyes would roll in the back of his head, and from these symptoms, a physician diagnosed him with petit mal seizures. He also had to go to the doctors frequently because of involuntary urinary problems, which caused him a great deal of humiliation. Bianchi had several behavioral problems and was prone to fits of anger, as well as bouts of insomnia, and was sent by his adoptive mother to Catholic school. He was also taken to a psychiatrist, where he was diagnosed with having passive-aggressive disorder at the age of 10. His adoptive father died in 1964, and after his death, Frances had to work while Kenneth was in high school. Despite his behavior problems, Kenneth Bianchi dated several girls and even joined a motorcycle club. And shortly after he graduated from high school in 1970, he married his high school sweetheart, Brenda Beck. But the marriage lasted only about 8 months when she left him without explanation. Kenneth Bianchi decided he wanted to become a police officer, so he enrolled at Monroe Community College to study police science, but dropped out of school after just 1 semester. He later applied for a position at the sheriff's department, but was rejected as a 2-year degree was required at that time. He went through a series of menial jobs, finally ended up as a security guard at a jewelry store. It was at this time that he found an opportunity to steal some of the jewels and valuables, which he often gave to girlfriends or to prostitutes to buy their loyalty. Bianchi moved to Los Angeles in 1976 and started spending time with his adoptive cousin, Angelo Buono. Angelo impressed Ken with his fancy clothes, flashy jewelry, and allegedly displayed a charm for getting women. Before long, they worked together as being pimps, and by late 1977, their relationship escalated into what became known as the Hillside Strangler murders. These murders first came to light when 2 prostitutes were found strangled and dumped on hillsides northeast of Los Angeles in October and November 1977. But it was not until the deaths of 5 other women who were not prostitutes, who had been abducted from middle-class neighborhoods, that the Hillside Strangler murders first gained a lot of media attention. There were 2 more deaths in December 1977 and February 1978 before the murders abruptly stopped. An extensive investigation by police proved fruitless until the arrest of Bianchi in January 1979 for the murder of 2 more women in Washington State, where he had moved. And this case subsequently linked him to the previous murders in Los Angeles. 2 teenage runaways, Sabra Hannon and Becky Spears, met Bianchi and Buono, who forced them to prostitute themselves. Eventually, Spears met a lawyer who was appalled at her situation and arranged for her to escape. Encouraged by Spears' escape, Hannon ran away from Bianchi and Buono a short time later. With their pimping income gone, they decided to find more teenage girls, and they started impersonating police officers. In addition, they supposedly purchased a trick list of men who frequented prostitutes. They purchased this list from Deborah Noble and her friend Yolanda Washington, who delivered the list to Buono in October 1977. Yolanda Washington mentioned to Buono that she always worked a certain strip of Sunset Boulevard. And when they found out that her friend, Deborah Noble, had deceived them about the trick list, they decided to take their anger out on Yolanda Washington. Her naked body was found on October 17, 1977, on a hillside near the Ventura Freeway. The detective working the case determined that the corpse was clean before the body was dumped, but that the body showed signs of torture and the victim had been raped. On November 1st, 1977, police were called to La Crescenta, a neighborhood located about 12 miles north of downtown LA, where the body of another teenage girl was found. She had been covered with a tarp when a homeowner discovered her body and did not want neighborhood children to see the horrific sight. Her body also showed signs of torture, indicating to police that she had been bound and strangled, and that the body had been dumped there but killed somewhere else. Coroner's report later determined that she had also been sodomized and raped. She was eventually identified as being Judith Lynn Miller, a former student of Hollywood High School, but after she dropped out of school, she became a runaway and a frequent sex worker. It was stated that Miller was last seen alive on Halloween, October 31st, 1977, talking to two men on Sunset Boulevard. This was actually Angelo Buono and Kenneth Bianchi, who, while posing as police officers, handcuffed her and took her to Buono's auto upholstery shop located at 7030 East Colorado Street in Glendale, which is the location where she was tortured and murdered. 5 days later, on November 6, 1977, the nude body of another woman was found near the Chevy Chase Country Club located in Glendale. Like Miller, her body bore signs of torture, and it was determined that she had been strangled, raped, and her body dumped. It was later discovered that this victim was Elisa Teresa Caston, who was last seen at a restaurant where she worked the night before her body was discovered. In addition to working full-time, Caston was a professional dancer in a group called the LA Knockers. Unlike the previous victims, she was not a prostitute. The Hillside Stranglers followed her home from work and pulled her over, presenting fake police badges, and told her that they were detectives and had to take her in for questioning. At some point in November 1977, Bianchi and Buono approached 24-year-old Catherine Lori Baker, who was the daughter of actor Peter Lorre, with the intent of abducting and killing her. But when they told her they were cops and asked for her driver's license and she produced it, they noticed the last name. And there was also a picture in her wallet of her sitting on her famous dad's lap when she was a child. So they let her go because they decided that they didn't want the attention of kidnapping and killing a celebrity or a celebrity's daughter. She was one of the lucky ones. On November 13th, 1977, two girls, 12-year-old Dolores Ann Dolly Cepeda and 14-year-old Sonia Marie Johnson, boarded a rapid transit bus on Colorado Boulevard and headed for home. They were last seen getting off the bus at York Boulevard and North 46th Avenue when they approached a two-tone sedan with two men inside. Their corpses were found by a 9-year-old boy who was out treasure hunting. Their bodies had been dumped on the hillside located near Dodger Stadium, and the bodies were found on November 20th, 1977. By then, both the girls' bodies had started to decompose, but it was easily determined that they had been strangled and raped also. Earlier that same day, hikers found the naked body of a 20-year-old named Christina Weckler, who was a student that had been attending the nearby Art Center College of Design. Her body was located on a hillside between Glendale and Eagle Rock. Her body also showed signs of being tied up, tortured, and raped. It was later determined that the killers had injected her with Windex. On November 23, 1977, the badly decomposed body of 28-year-old Evelyn Jane King was found. She was an aspiring actress and had been reported missing on November 9th, a couple of weeks earlier. Her body was discovered in some bushes off the Los Feliz Boulevard, near an off-ramp on the Golden State Freeway, Interstate 5. By the time she was found, she was already decomposing to the extent where it was hard to tell if she had been raped and tortured. But investigators indicated that they could determine that she had been strangled. By this time, authorities had created a Hillside Strangler task force. On November 29, 1977, police found the body of 18-year-old Lauren Ray Wagner, who was a business student who lived with their parents in the San Fernando Valley, located just north of downtown Los Angeles. It was found that she had been tied up and tortured, including burn marks being found on her hands. A witness allegedly saw her abduction and heard Wagner cry out, "You won't get away with this." But for a while, the killers did. On December 14, 1977, The naked body of a 17-year-old prostitute named Kimberly Diane Martin was found. Unlike previous victims, was not dumped on the hillside, but was found in the deserted Los Angeles City Hall lot. Her body also showed signs of torture. She had signed up with the call girl agency because she had fears of the Hillside Strangler on the loose. But the killers called the agency from a payphone booth and gave her the address of a vacant apartment. Police later investigated the address she was called out to and found that there was nobody there. And so I assumed that once she got there, they abducted her and killed her like they did the other girls. The final body of Hillside Strangler victims in Los Angeles was discovered on February 17, 1978, when a helicopter pilot observed a orange Datsun that had been abandoned down a cliff just off Angeles Crest Highway. Police responded to the scene and discovered the nude body of the car owner, Cindy Lee Hedspeth. Again, she had been tied up and tortured, as well as raped, then strangled to death and placed in the trunk of her car, which was then pushed off a cliff. It was later discovered that her murder had been unplanned, but that Bianchi had arrived at his cousin's auto upholstery shop to discover Hudspeth in the company of his cousin, where she was negotiating a deal for upholstery work on her vehicle. The two men had a private discussion and decided that she would be their next victim. Less than a year later, in January 1979, after an extensive investigation by the task force, police charged Bianchi and Buono with all these crimes. As I said previously, Bianchi had fled to Bellingham, Washington, where he was soon arrested for raping and killing two women there that he lured to a home for a house-sitting job. Upon his arrest and incarceration in jail, Kenneth Bianchi immediately set up an insanity plea, claiming that he had identity and personality disorders, which was the person who had committed the murders, not he. At his trial, Kenneth Bianchi pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity or having multi-personality disorders, and claimed that one of his personalities, Steve Walker, had committed the crimes. It was believed that he had recently seen the film Sybil, which was about a woman who had suffered from multi-personality disorder.
I really have no memory of having murdered anybody. Even to satisfy other person's allegations at one time, I attempted to think about what it might feel like, and I have never been able to do that.
Are you able to talk about any conversations you might have had with Mr. Buono that would give us some understanding of these murders in California?
I've never really had any substantial recollections of any conversations regarding Mr. Buono. Here, I had access to all the police reports and photos as a matter of discovery weeks prior to the hypnosis sessions. Based upon my extensive reading of these reports, my literally absorbing these reports to find out what was happening, I feel that the motivation may have been, for whoever committed these crimes, may have been simply to remove evidence, simply to yes, I plea bargained to primarily and basically and pretty much solely escape the death penalty. The death penalty was very much a reality.
How many murders were involved in those charges that you plea bargained?
7. I don't believe, as a Christian now, that it's right for even society to take another person's life. Although society hires people to push the button or pull the cord or whatever, it's still murder, still killing.
But like I said, the psychiatrist basically took that off the table. And Bianchi had eventually admitted that he was faking that disorder. He was, however, eventually diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder with sexual sadism overtones.
Today in a Bellingham, Washington courtroom, Kenneth Bianchi, in the hope of avoiding a death sentence, confessed to 2 murders in Bellingham, then confessed to participation in the Los Angeles Hillside Stranglings, and went on to accuse his cousin Angelo Buono of being his accomplice.
To even begin to try and live with myself, I have to take responsibility for what I've done. And I have to do everything I can to get Angelo Buono and to devote my entire life to do everything I possibly can to give my life so that nobody else will hopefully won't follow my footsteps.
And Kenneth Bianchi eventually decided to testify against his cousin in exchange for leniency. At the conclusion of his cousin's trial in 1983, the judge stated he would not have had the slightest reluctance to impose the death penalty, but could not do so since it had been overturned at that time in the state of California. Like I said, the legal case against Buono was largely based on his adoptive cousin, Kenneth Bianchi. But deciding that Bianchi was an unreliable witness, the case's original prosecutors had moved to dismiss all charges against Buono and set him free. But the presiding judge refused to release him and reassigned the case to the California AG's office. Buono's trial would become the longest in American history at that point, lasting from November 1981 to November 1983. Whereby a jury finally convicted Buono on 9 counts of murder and sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. In 1980, Kenneth Bianchi became romantically involved with a lady named Veronica Compton, and during his trial, she testified in his defense. She was later convicted and imprisoned for attempting to strangle a woman she had lured to a motel in an attempt to convince authorities that the real Hillside Strangler was still on the loose and that the wrong man had been imprisoned. Wow, the things you'll do for love, I guess, huh? She was released for that crime in 2003. In 1986, Angelo Buono became married behind bars to Christine Kazuka, a mother of 3 and a supervisor at a Los Angeles state unemployment office. It is very weird to me that any woman would want to date or marry serial killers or serial killer suspects in prison, but it actually happens quite often. For some strange reason, some women are attracted to guys like this. Maybe it's their mother instinct. Maybe they feel sorry for them. And these guys tell them about the rough childhood that they had. Maybe they want to be the loving mother they never had. Some convicts claim to turn Christian and convince females that Christ forgave everybody for their sins. So if that woman is also Christian, why shouldn't she? As I recall, I had Buono at New Folsom Prison, which is a level 4 high security prison, in the late 1980s, which would have been shortly after he married. There was nothing unusual about him that I recall. To me, he was just one of 1,000 other convicts we had in New Folsom. But when so-called celebrity inmates came in, other staff and or inmates would always point them out to me. I don't believe he was there for a very long time and was likely transferred out to Corcoran when it opened in 1988. Like I stated at the beginning, Bianchi is currently serving a sentence at the Washington State Penitentiary located in Walla Walla, Washington, in the far southeast corner of the state. He has been denied parole several times, but will be eligible again in 2025. In 2002, Buono was found dead at Calipatria State Prison, located out in the desert in southeast California, where he was serving a life sentence. So what can we learn from the Hillside Strangler case? Well, as I stated in the Ted Bundy and Green River case, any woman who works in sex trafficking is at high risk. Also, if you're pulled over by a police officer, especially today, you can call 911 on your cell phone and ask for verification if you are suspicious. They will verify that, yes, indeed, a patrol car has been legally justified in stopping and questioning you. You can also take live video and send that to somebody. Most police agencies have body cams right now, but that could be extra protection also for yourself. Don't just assume that anybody trying to kidnap you is just a robber. Many times, victims who survived their attacks said they obeyed because they feared being shot. Well, in the case of these girls, they ended up dead.
A local woman who gained national recognition after this incident, where she fought off a man who tried to attack her at a gym apartment complex, is now helping inspire other women to learn self-defense. It's part of a new campaign called Never Give Up.
Because that's what she did. That's what she did not do. She never gave up. Fox 13's Tony Sadiku caught up with Nashali Alma as she brings attention to a difficult reality.
We're at Youth at Carrollwood today, where next week they're going to be doing a self-defense class for anyone who wants to learn. You don't have to be a member. All you have to do is sign up and show up. And it's all inspired by the brave actions of this young lady, Nashali Alma. Thank you so much for your time. By now, so many people have seen the video. It's gained national attention. And for you, this is, you know, essentially what you want. You want to raise awareness to what so many women unfortunately go through, right?
Oh, yeah. It's very important because when a lot of women are in these situations, they don't know what to do. And I think offering these self-defense classes will help them be more empowered and strong-minded and strong-willed to be able to fight back.
You can also carry pepper spray or sound an alarm, a whistle, a horn, anything to draw attention to witnesses. Be careful when you're in bars these days. It is very common now for people to drop stuff in your drink, especially if you get up to go to the bathroom or get distracted. That's when they will take advantage of you. You also probably want to avoid using the same routines, such as taking the same route to drive home from work. Even me as a corrections officer, I used to take different routes sometimes, just in case somebody was following me and trying to hurt me. You want to be very careful about what you reveal on social media these days. There's some real creeps out there who will try to stalk you. Don't give out information about yourself or about others that you know to strangers. You don't need to be paranoid, but you don't need to be foolish either. Also, always tell a trusted friend or relative where you're going. There's technology now where your phone also can ping to help locate you. You might even want to have a tracker device placed on your vehicle. This can help even if it's just stolen and you're not abducted. And there are other things you can do. For more information, try contacting your local police department or community service officer. And with that, this is Gabe Morales signing off for Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians.